Hello, theoretical viewer. Uh, let's start this again. Hi, viewer. Coming to you today from my quaint mother's house, my quaint, eccentric mother's house. I'm dog sitting today, and so I can't do my usual work, which is, of course, bookkeeping and tax representation and all those endlessly stimulating things. I say that without irony, understanding that, of course, it's not a universal feeling. Anywho, yeah, I'm watching my mother's dog, and I mentioned that she was eccentric, and she is. She treats this dog like royalty. She multi-course meals with like various ingredients, 2 car rides a day, 3 walks a day, specified times to go out into the back uh, to eliminate. Yeah, it's a well treated dog, and I don't treat dogs that well. Don't tell my mom, but she's having some medical work done, and I'm making sure that the dog is fed with something and doesn't poop on the floor. Hopefully. Okay, so anyway, since I'm here, not doing my usual thing, I thought this would be a good time to make some content. So here I am. I'm going to make that content. I'm going to tell the story of how I ended up where I am today, running a small accountancy firm. Why did I make that choice, and how did I get here? Right? It's going to be kind of a meandering story, so you might want to have a little bit of coffee, a little bit of tea, a little something else. Because this will take a bit. All right. Well, let me start the story here. Late October 2021. I think it was October 26th, 25th. It had been a really long tax season. And I'd been working kind of double days, right? I would work a normal day of about 8 hours. And then I'd start my second day. And my second day was similar to my first, except the second part of my second day, that was on technically the same day, involved drinking gin and tonics as I wrote emails, countless emails to countless clients. Now I think I did a pretty good job, so I wasn't totally sloshed for those periods, but it was a ton of work, right? And I was exhausted, even though it was technically past tax season at that point. I had there were still returns that were being worked on. I was taking some returns from the firm that I was working in that I normally wouldn't do those returns, but I did them anyway to try to get some better client experience, right? Anyway, I won't go into the detail there. So long day is finally over. It's probably 10 o'clock at night, and I go downstairs, get a little something to eat. I remember I turned on some YouTube, and I was eating generic Doritos, the Aldi's Doritos. I don't know if they have those where you are, but yeah, generic Doritos, and they're everybody's good as the original, but less expensive. Anyway, so I was eating those Doritos, and I got up to get a second little bite to eat, and the next thing I remember, I was laying on my back. I was laying on my back staring at the ceiling, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was, and I couldn't talk. I saw the cracks in some of the paint up on the ceiling. We live in an older house, and I thought, you know what? I think I'm at a house party. I'm in college, and I must have drank so much at this house party that I passed out, and now I'm laying on the ground. And I thought that because everything was kind of swimming, and I had this really bad nausea. And so I'm laying there, and I could see my chips that had fallen out of my hand, the bag of chips about 2 feet away. And I realized I couldn't really move. And then I started to try to talk. I couldn't really talk either. So I started to moan. I said, "Mrr, mrr." Now, my family at this point had already gone to bed, or at least were in their rooms for the night, right? It's a big house. It's a big older house. I have 4 daughters and a wife, right? So it's, Anyway, so I'm laying there, I vomit a little bit, and I'm thinking, boy, how much did I drink? I'm a crazy college student out partying. Well, anyway, so finally I started to be able to form words, and I said, dying. I'm dying. And I said, I'm dying. And nobody was coming, right? Again, fairly large house, and they were all upstairs. And I just kept doing that, kept talking about I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. Finally, my wife, who had just gotten surgery on her ankle, she was in a big cast, right? She had to walk with crutches. She made her way downstairs, as did a couple of my daughters. And there they found me, laying in a ever-growing pool of my own vomit on the ground, moaning that I was dying. And I told them to call 911. And they said, what happened? And I said, drank too much. That's all I could think of. I thought, I must have drank so much alcohol that I couldn't move, right? Because I couldn't make any sense of where I was, and I hadn't had that much. Anyway, so in comes the EMT crew finally. I hear the sirens. They come and they say, oh, I had a little too much to drink, did you, buddy? And they kind of jostled me as they were putting me into the stretcher, because I think that they kind of felt like, wow, that's pathetic. And I felt fairly pathetic, but at the same time, I felt like I was dying, so I kind of wasn't worried about being embarrassed. So anywho, into the ambulance I went. Now, at this point, my memory gets a little patchy. I remember parts, and I'll tell you the parts I remember. So the first part I remember, I'm laying there in the ambulance, and I see one EMT talking to the other. They look at me and they say, we don't think this is actually alcohol intoxication, do we? And they're like, nope. I was like, okay, so it's something else. And then I remember they were trying to get me on a life flight, the helicopter, to go across state to the university hospital. And then they couldn't because it was too foggy. And so I ended up in like 3 different ambulances for at least a few hours. And then the next thing I remember is waking up post-op, and I don't know if I was in ICU. I guess I was in the post-op room. I'm not sure what it was. It was either ICU or something even worse than ICU, if there is something. And so, I had a catheter in, which I don't recommend, dudes. Not fun. Catheters, don't like them. Pass if you're able. But I wasn't able to pass because, of course, I couldn't pee. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, my wife was there in the room with me, sitting there, and I could hear this guy moaning in the room next door. I'm like, what's going on? Had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is basically an aneurysm in your brain. It bursts, you start bleeding. Nothing really causes it that they know of. It wasn't like a result of high blood pressure or unhealthy diet necessarily. It was just something that happened, right? And most people, I think that a majority of people either die as it's happening or within a month or 2 afterwards, right? Spoiler alert, I'm alive. So anywho, yes, right. So I'm in ICU and I can't eat anything, and it takes days and days, and it's not, telling the story of a hospital stay is tough to make interesting. But hi, dog. Anyway, I was getting a little better, although I was losing a ton of weight. I think I lost 70 pounds by the end of this. And finally, I think my mother may be home from surgery. I'll probably have to take a break. Anyway, so where was I? Yes. So I was getting better and better, but losing a lot of weight. And, every time I felt my head here, I had this big divot where they drilled into my brain or into my skull to, get the blood out and do the surgery. And they had to tie up basically the little area, the blood vessel that had burst. It's amazing what people can do. Anywho, yeah. So I was feeling better and better and better, and then finally I started to feel worse. I started to get feverish, and I started to feel like I was in a video game, and all the other patients and me were managing aircraft carrier fleets, and I think there might have been some like battleships and cruisers as well. But each of us represented a country, and we were managing the fleets, and some of us were at war, and some of us weren't. And this was all happening right here. I thought it was real, and so I remember calling for my nurse. And I was like, "Hey, how do I make the game stop? It's cool and everything, but I don't want to be in the game anymore." And he just looks at me like, "What?" But anyway, yeah, and I just constant vomiting, constant nausea, and this feeling of like tumbling in my own bed. It's kind of like hell on earth. Turns out I had meningitis, right? I had gotten a little infection in the wound site from the hospital bacteria, and what do you know? Yeah, so almost died from that too, but they didn't get me yet. So luckily I made it through that. A bunch of hallucination and just annoying the piss out of my nurses, constantly asking for more pain medication. Oh, can I have the pain medication yet? Can I have it yet? No, you just talked to me 20 minutes ago. There's nothing I can give you. What about the anti-nausea? No, you just had the anti-nausea. It fucking sucked, dude. So I healed. I lived. And, long period of physical therapy after that. And, miraculously, I had no damage. At least they couldn't find any damage. If I seem a little weird, I was a little weird before too. So it's not that. It's not the brain damage. Somehow I made it through unscathed. And, one of my decisions after that was to live a much healthier lifestyle, no more gin and tonics, but and a little bit more exercise, try to get exercise every day, so forth. Right. Okay, so I finally, just little by little, built up my strength. I was back home, 70 pounds down, and I started to just feel better, and I could finally go back to work a little bit, right? So I did. And I was working part-time at first, just a couple hours, and then, a little bit more. And I was, helping all these people with their tax and bookkeeping problems and payroll problems too. So at that time, I got an offer from another remote accountancy firm. And, it was a good offer, and it seemed like a really cool company. It was a startup. And so I was like, yeah, let's go. And so I took it, and I loved that place. I loved the people. I loved the clients. And I even loved the bosses, right? I loved the people who were running it. Really, really cool company, right? But imperfect, as all businesses are. And as I went through, I noticed that my outlook had changed, right? I realized, and this is going to sound like a cliche, but I realized just how little time we have on Earth. I came this close twice, and I was like, I could go next year. Poof. I need to be really careful about my choices. I need to decide what I really want to do and then do that thing, right? And what I realized as I was working in this remote accountancy firm, which is a perfectly fine firm, was that I couldn't handle the mediocrity of the client experience. I'll explain. When you're working at a bigger firm, you have a slice of what you can do, right? And you have your purview, your power. Anything beyond that power, you have to kind of cajole people or influence them or sweet talk them or, beg them or nag them, whatever. The point is, I wasn't running things. I wasn't in charge of it. And I started to there are all these little details that were going wrong for clients. I wasn't getting traction and being able to fix them, right? And as I looked back on my career, it really had been this way the whole time. I'd been in somebody else's business, watching as I did my part in a way that I took pride in, right? And I think other people took pride in their parts too. but ultimately not giving the customer service experience that I wanted to give. And that, when my first jobs were in customer service and retail, making, a little bit more than minimum wage. And, I mean, people like to complain about retail, but I really enjoyed that I could make somebody's day better, right? Just with a limited interaction. I could talk to them and I could make them have a better day and kind of turn that frown upside down from the first time I saw them to the end. And this was at a gas station, right, that I was at. So, as an accountant, someone who had, 3 college degrees, that was still important to me. I want to turn that frown upside down. I want people to have a positive experience as a result of my work. I don't want them to feel like, oh, I can't trust these guys. And too often I saw it, right? What I realized was that I was in a position to apologize for people for the decisions that people above me or to the side of me had made, right? I had no influence, no way to change those decisions. I had no way to make the experience better, but I got to bear the brunt of. I was a relationship manager, right? So I was talking to people, and I was in charge of kind of getting information, conveying information, making sure their experience is as good as possible. Anyway, I couldn't make the experience as good as I wanted it to, and having almost died, I realized, look, I can do everything that all these people are doing, right? I can form an entity. I can file things with the Secretary of State. I can do income tax. I can work with sales and use tax. I can even do some excise tax. I worked in excise tax for a while. I could do everything from the beginning to the end of the accounting process. I can do the bookkeeping too. If it's important to me that I want my clients to have a great experience, well, isn't it incumbent on me to go ahead and make that choice and go do it? And I didn't do it right away, right? But that's when I started to play with the idea of, maybe I should really work this side firm I've got. Maybe that should be my main gig. My problem was I was afraid, right? I was terrified because I had 6 mouths to feed and one income, mine. If I failed, they fail too, right? If I end up homeless, look, they probably end up homeless too. It's a lot of responsibility. And so that's what kept me working for so long in somebody else's business. So finally, though, it started to wear on me more and more, right? Just having to wait on other people to fix something that was impacting the way my clients, their experience was. And it was a kind of a helpless feeling. It was a feeling where I often felt like kind of a hypocrite because I was trying to explain away the failures of someone else repeatedly, right? And after a while, the person who you're explaining and apologizing to looks back and says, well, maybe this guy's the problem. Maybe he's the one that's causing this bad accounting experience. And granted, I'm not saying anything negative about my previous firm. It was great, very well-intentioned people, and a lot of people had positive experiences, but some didn't. And that's going to happen in any firm, right? So not trying to cast aspersions there. Anywho, so finally it just became intolerable. And I just said, you know what? This is what I want to do. I could die tomorrow. And I'm not going to die in the middle of struggling for someone else's vision, someone else's dream. I want my dream. I know what I want that client experience to be like. I'm going to go make it happen. And I thought, okay, so what's the worst that could happen with this? I could be a massive failure, get evicted, thrown out on the street. But I thought, you know what? I'd still figure out how to service my clients, and I'd still figure out a way to keep my family safe. And it took a little bit of selfishness to make that decision, because I wasn't just playing I wasn't playing with house money. I was playing with my own and my family's money. But I did it. I took the leap, and because I realized, I was 46 years old at that point, and how long am I going to live? I don't know. You don't know either, right? And you hear these stories about people in public accounting, like on Reddit. If you ever go to r/accounting, it's a lot of fun reads there, people bitching. But you hear about these people laboring away in public, just working and working and working so that they can get to be partner, right? In my case, it would have been, working and working, working so I could have been a senior manager or a director. It wasn't worth it, right? Because you may not even make it to that point, and once you do, you'll be just as busy, just as worried about everything, right? And so that's when I pulled the plug. I said, okay, I'm leaving. No, I don't have anything lined up. I'm just going to go and try to find clients in any way I can. Do a lot of praying, thinking a lot about some scripture. I'm not one of those Christians that tries to shove it down your throat, but I do think about that kind of thing from time to time. And I think about what is it, Peter out on the boat. They're out on the water, and Jesus is like sleeping, and he says, "Wake up, Jesus Lord! It's raining out here. It's a crazy storm." And Jesus wakes up. He says, "Oh, ye of little faith." Basically, like, even if I'm asleep, I got this. Why are you worried? Right? I don't think I told that super well, but anyway. So, maintaining my faith, went out and started my business, finding clients where I could, and I'm still finding clients. Hey, maybe you're going to be one of those clients. I would love to be your tax, bookkeeping, advisory partner, right? Because ultimately, what I want to do, I want to work with people kind of like me who decided to roll the dice and say, you know what, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to go ahead and be in charge and do it myself, right? And I'm going to fail or succeed on my own terms. Now, the people who do that, most of them aren't accountants, and they aren't thinking about, okay, so while you're over there achieving your dream, what's your tax liability going to be like, and have you filed all your your BOI filings and Secretary of State filings for the year, right? Most people aren't thinking about that, so I could be a great partner in that. But what I really enjoy is just sharing the experience with those people, sharing time and being able to hear their story, and yeah. So yeah, I guess that's it for now. Thanks for listening. Bye.